Hey, what's up everyone? Dragon here, back again, here to tell you that you should be reading Tyrannosaur Canyon. So before we get into this discussion recommendation video, I want to apologize for getting this video up a day later. I normally put these up on Mondays. Obviously it's Tuesday. I've been very sick lately, and yesterday I was basically just comatose in bed, hocked up on like NyQuil and Dayquil, so I was really in no condition to give any kind of intelligent recommendation of any kind. I kind of would have probably just been propped up in front of the camera like Weekend at Bernie's style, and at best been a drooling idiot. So I spared you all that horrific sight, and I'm back today. Still a little sick. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, but I've got enough drugs coursing through me now to kind of keep me on my feet, hopefully long enough in this video. But if I kind of just drop out of sight, that's why. But anyway, on to the discussion. So Tyrannosaur Canyon is a 2005 novel written by Douglas Preston, who a lot of you guys might know that name because he works a lot of times with Lincoln Child. And they've done like Relic and Relicore, which we talked about on the show, and they basically do all the Pendergast novels. And basically this novel kind of takes place out in New Mexico, where essentially basically a police officer, basically Tom, finds a notebook that was left behind by a scientist with all these codes and kind of numbers in it, and he's trying to decipher what it is. And basically you find that they're kind of radar readings, and there's a rock sample that comes along with it, and you basically find that they lead to the most intact skeletal remain, or just remain in general, of a Tyrannosaurus rex. Though the extent of how well preserved these remains are something of the significant find, which I won't spoil for you because that's kind of the whole point of the story. And I can't give away too much with this one. I've had a few of these discussions where I have to be very careful what I say, because telling you too much basically gives away the whole story. Midnight was an example of that. This one is kind of along the same vein. There's very little I can tell you about the plot, because it kind of gives away certain key elements. But long story short, there are a lot of people within the government who are trying to find these notebooks, to find these remains. And basically it kind of turns into a little bit of a kind of almost like a treasure hunt for this Tyrannosaur. So if you're thinking Tyrannosaur Canyon and you think it's like this lost place they find where there's a T-Rex, which admittedly I kind of thought that when I first heard the name. I was like, ooh, Tyrannosaur Canyon. Then I started reading the synopsis, like, oh, not so much. But it's a very interesting story because it puts paleontology, which is kind of, those are the guys who go up and dig dinosaur bones, not archaeologists. If you ever wonder what the difference between archaeologists and paleontologists is, archaeologists discover and uncover ancient human civilizations. Paleontologists kind of uncover like the ancient world, biologically speaking. So dinosaurs, mammoths, anything from the Permian era. Basically, if it's prehistoric, that's kind of their arena. So basically it puts paleontology at the front and center, which was very appealing to me right away because I'm a paleontology buff. And essentially it becomes kind of this the end justifies the means kind of search for this dinosaur, and you kind of see how something as kind of important and really should be considered as pure as science can kind of be perversed and twisted and warped by greed, much like anything and everything in life. So much of kind of the human evil, if you will, that we see expressed in our everyday lives is done so through things that are supposed to better us. Excuse me, sick. And that's kind of what the story does. The last place you would think to kind of have corruption and murder and basically just kind of people of nefarious types would be something like a field of science, like paleontology, basically. And yet you see that once there's, something of value to be had in any capacity, it kind of brings out the worst in everybody. You realize that it's basically, the story is kind of showing you the ugly side of humanity. It's taking something that is inherently, wonderful and amazing, and it's kind of being corrupted and perverse because now people are being killed over it, people are being assassinated over it, and it's supposed to be this wondrous discovery. And it kind of takes me back kind of the old bone wars when dinosaur fossils were first being really categorized and studied, especially in the United States, and you had paleontology who were basically feuding with each other, and going to their different campsites, destroying their finds, trying to be the first person to make the big discovery, making a lot of false claims, and kind of showing you how kind of business and greed got in the way of what should have been purely just a, amazing time of just scientific discovery. And to be had, there was a lot back then, but it was also coupled with a lot of this kind of this unfortunate, this nastier, darker side of things, when kind of the human nature kind of gets mixed in a little bit too much with like the science, in the sense that the science is just pure unpolluted thing where it's just kind of the hard fact, it's just the numbers, it's science, and kind of that human element gets in the way and twists it and warps it into something else. And this kind of a modern day telling of that story is like, what if we found a paleontological discovery of this significance, of this nature? Because, you know, by the time discovering dinosaurs, they existed, was the big deal. Today we all know about dinosaurs, we all know that we're real, and why, you know, nobody is downplaying kind of, you know, the awesomeness of dinosaurs, certainly not me. You know, we know about them, so when you hear a discovery about, okay, they found a new fossil of a new species, while people like myself are very excited about it, unfortunately the average Joe, not so much. But what happens if you found the remains of a dinosaur that were this complete, this well preserved? There was recently a new species of dinosaur that were not a new species, but basically a dinosaur mummy that was originally uncovered, and it was basically perfectly preserved. It looked like a statue because of the way all the mineral deposits, how it was preserved. It was kind of like a perfect casting of, you know, skin, armor plating, the whole 9 yards. Now, what happens if you find basically that? But in the form of, you know, the most famous dinosaur of all time? It would be a big deal, because not only are you discovering a dinosaur, you're basically discovering the dinosaur. You're being able to look at this thing and see it, not just the bones, not just skin impressions. You're basically able to see what this thing was. It's less of a fossil and more like the body, basically. And while we all think, great, this be, you know, cover of National Geographic, it'd be such a huge deal, we also forget too that, you know, based on where these bones are found, based on the location, the politics of it, whose reputations are on the line, who has claim to what, all this stuff comes into play in this story. And again, you just kind of see the greediness of kind of the human condition. And I can't go into too much detail about why certain parties are interested in this fossil, why certain people want to find it so bad. There is a kind of a government side to this, which again, I can't really give away because it'll, you know, give everything away. But it also, again, it shows you something that should be an amazing discovery, that this wonderful moment in human history, this great moment in science. And again, what it turns into, kind of the horrible, you know, kind of degradation of an amazing discovery based on all these other elements that should not matter, that should not come into play. And that's basically kind of what human beings do. They kind of sometimes take something simple and complicated, and or take something great and perverse it in a way. And that's kind of what this story is. It's the darker side of ambition. It's the darker side of, you know, humanity, and what humanity kind of does to good things. Like that. I know that's kind of a weird, ambiguous way of saying it, but that's basically what this story is. It's saying, hey, here's something great. Now watch all these assholes mess it up. And I know that's a bit of an oversimplification, but that's what it boils down to. And it's a great, you know, look into kind of the politics of even science. That, you know, a lot of people think that scientists are just these people making tons and tons of money off this and that, and you know, you really don't realize there's a lot of it's like any other kind of job. It's your reputation, it's trying to get funding, it's trying to get grants for the work. So honestly, if you find some amazing discovery, that's going to help you get funding, grants, that's going to help you get your, you know, your digs and your research basically funded for years to come. So these kind of big discoveries, you know, hold a lot of importance for scientists, not just because it's, hey, it's a great discovery and you learn something new, but it allows them to continue doing what they do. Because if you keep turning up kind of the same old, well, while for them it's fascinating because you're learning more about this ecosystem, this ecology, these animals, to the average person, to people who are going to want to bankroll you, it's like, that's old news. What have you got new for us? And unfortunately, that's kind of the struggle they deal with. That's kind of the pressure a lot of scientists, not just in paleontology, but in most fields of science, come under. It's like, okay, that was great then, what have you gotten for me today? I want something new, I want a new bang for my buck. So something like this would certainly be a big bang and get them a lot of bucks, so they can continue their research, so they can continue to make more discoveries and more breakthroughs and learn about this long lost ecosystem. But again, you see kind of the politics and the greed and what it can do to certain people, and how maybe certain people are involved with this whose desire to be a part of this is not so altruistic. It's not really about the science, it's about kind of, you know, shameless self-promotion, if you will. But yeah, so that's kind of what I took away from this story. I know it sounds kind of a bit of a bummer story when I describe it like that, but it's actually really, really fascinating. It's kind of a slick read too. If you're familiar with their other books, like like Relic and stuff, you'll see a lot of hallmarks of that kind of writing with Douglas Preston there. But again, it's an interesting story, and again, it puts science at the forefront, which is always something I like. But it's not painting science with just kind of these like a rosy picture of it. It's not just looking at it through rose-colored sunglasses. Science itself is this pure, wonderful thing, but unfortunately, it all comes down to the people behind it, the people perpetuating it, and what their ambitions are. Like anything, it can be messed up and perverse based on who's behind it and what they're trying to get out of it. And it basically just shows it doesn't matter if it's science, religion, politics. On the surface, all these things are supposed to be wonderful, but then you have people who get involved with it who make it not so much. And that's, again, really what I took away from this story. So, with that said, Tyrannosaur Canyon, have you read it? If so, what did you think? If not, I will leave the links in the description section below where you can pick it up, check it out, come back, give me some of your thoughts. I'm very curious to know. Do you like stories that put kind of science at the forefront where it's really about the science? I do, because again, one of the ways I, discover a lot of different fields of science is I read a lot of, science fiction that is based on particular fields of science, and it gets me interested in the real science behind it. And then I go and do research, and while a lot of the more fantastic elements of these stories are the made up part, the fiction of the science fiction, it leads me to the actual science, and then I kind of get hooked on that and want to know more about that. So I'm curious to know if you guys maybe have kind of the same, find yourself doing the same thing. You think, oh, this is interesting, I want to know more about this. How much of this is true? How much of this is possible? And then you go and do your own research and kind of educate yourself on it a little bit more and become that much more knowledgeable about stuff. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Again, I'm sorry to put up a day late. Like I said, yesterday, I'm not saying I'm winning any beauty contests in general on this channel, but yesterday for sure, it was just a big, nasty, bubbly, mucusy mess, and I love you guys far too much to subject you to that, so I did not. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace!